Mission isn't just something we do because we want to be do-gooders. It's who we are as followers of Jesus Christ. It's our faith in action.
Today, Reverend Steve Ottley joins us from Ontario, Canada, where he serves as Canada Central District Superintendent. On this episode, he walks us through the Good Samaritan based on Luke 10, and he reflects on Canada Central's partnership with the church in Cuba.
Jesus was a master storyteller. Read through the 4 Gospels in the New Testament and you'll find some of the most fascinating stories. Sometimes his message is crystal clear. Other times you have to sit with the story for a while. One of Jesus' most familiar stories is the one we know as the Good Samaritan. Many lessons that come from that story is found in the Gospel of Luke chapter 10, verse 30 to 37. And one of the lessons is the answer to the question, who is my neighbor? Is it the person who lives next door to me? Or, if I'm generous, I can expand that out. Is that the person who lives in my city or my town? Is it those who look like me, believe like me, who love me? Who exactly is my neighbor? If you've been around Scripture for a while, you know that the Jews and the Samaritans actually hated each other, and that's not an overstatement. Jews would add miles to their travel in order to avoid going through Samaria. They wanted nothing to do with Samaritans, and the feeling was mutual from the Samaritans to the Jews. Jesus used the story of the Good Samaritan who cared tenderly for the Jewish traveler who was robbed along the Jericho highway to answer that question, who is my neighbor? As he lay dying on the roadside, the Jewish man was grossly neglected by 2 of his fellow Jews, people who looked like him, who believed like him. They were actually Jewish religious leaders, but they just passed him by. Faith in action is faith that moves from mere spoken words to tangible action, like we see in the Good Samaritan, tenderly lending care to someone who he naturally did not have anything in common with. In fact, someone who historically and culturally would have hated him. This Samaritan man simply used what he had available to him on the road to show compassion and to bring help to this dying man. Chapter 10, verse 34 and 35 of Luke said, going over to him, to the man who was robbed, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. That's a neighbor. I love the quote from C.S. Lewis when he said, do not waste your time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, C.S. Lewis says, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. If you injure someone you dislike, you will find yourself disliking him more. If you do him a good turn, you will find yourself disliking him less. I love that. The Canada Central District has had the opportunity to exercise faith in action in a tangible way through our Cuba partnership. For many years, Canada Central District has had a partnership with the Cuba Church. When we started this, it was 1 district in Cuba, and now there are 3 districts in Cuba. Over the years, it has evolved from work and witness teams traveling to Cuba and assisting with building and ministry programs, to currently, we are supporting pastors and churches by providing funds towards their financial sustenance. I'm so grateful for Pastor Belkis Fernandez, who is our Cuba Partnership Facilitator. She coordinates with the churches across our district and the district superintendents in Cuba to ensure that we do our very best to assist each pastor and the 149 churches in Cuba. This is a way that we exercise faith in action by giving from the resources that God has blessed us with. We encourage our churches and individuals and families and groups to give 200 Canadian dollars a year to support the pastors and the 149 churches in Cuba. The good news is the church in Cuba has grown tremendously over the years since we started this partnership. The challenge is that's a significant higher number of churches than we have on the Canada Central District. So we're always looking for individuals and families and groups to step into the gap and exercise faith in action. But God continues to help us as we share the load of helping our sisters and brothers in Cuba. And so faith in action is faith that moves from mere spoken words to tangible actions that make a difference in the life of others.
How can you give compassion to